Okay, I think I'm live. So welcome everybody. Welcome to Earth Live Lessons. My name is Abi March, and I am the I am the Learning and Engagement Manager at London Wildlife Trust. London Wildlife Trust is a charity which is dedicated to protecting London's wildlife and wild spaces. And we do that by having lots of nature reserves. We've got over 35 in London. And we are part of an umbrella organisation called the Wildlife Trusts. So wherever you are in the UK, the Wildlife Trust is split up into 46 different wildlife trusts. So you're going to have a local wildlife trust near you. Today we are going to be looking at mini beasts on your doorstep. I want to say a big thank you to Lizzie Daly for inviting me to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. And a little bit about me. I am a teacher and I am a conservationist. I have worked across the world. One of my biggest passions is the biggest, bestest fish in the sea, which is the whale shark, and I have worked around the world studying them. If I bring it closer to you, that's what a whale shark would more look like because they are huge. But 4 years ago, I decided to move to London, and I swapped the biggest megafauna for very little charismatic microfauna. And I started to learn more about lots of different small animals, small invertebrates, which are all around us. And you may not realise quite how many there are and quite how exciting they are. So we're going to talk about that. So living in London, big city, there is lots of green spaces in London, so we're really lucky, but not everybody has access to a garden. I myself have just a small yard. It's probably maybe a snooker table in there, but I wouldn't be able to play snooker. Not that I can anyway, but I still managed to find loads of different wildlife in my tiny little yard, and I collected some of it. I keep looking down here because there's a collection of my animals, and it might surprise you to know that there is some animals that are probably not very far away from you. You could, if you've got a little garden, even if you've just got some plant pots on a balcony, you have probably got an animal which has 27,000 teeth. That's right, 27,000. Now, I'm rolling up my sleeves because if you're ever going to meet an animal with 27,000 teeth, you've got to prepare yourself. So I've got a few of them in here. So one was nearly escaping. I think you're going to be on here. Come here, little one. So maybe I'll put your friend on here as well because he's a bit bigger. And he might be able to look at him a bit better. So the animal with 27,000 teeth. Drum roll, please. If you can see that. These are he's stuck. These are little slugs. So slugs are amazing. I really love slugs and snails. I'm not sure if you can see him here very well, but they have, this one's waking up and this one's a bit bigger. If you do find a slug, if it's all just hunched up, they do quite like having a little massage, and you can breathe on them just to warm them up, and they often sort of start looking around then. And excuse my drawing, but here is my drawing of a slug on the bottom, and if we were to stick a shell on it, that would be a snail. So the only real difference between slugs and snails is the shell, and it's classed as a snail if it can fully retract into its shell. And there are some, he's very much on the go there. There are some slugs which kind of have a like half a shell, so it's like, are they a slug? Are they a snail? And they're called semi-slugs. So I might put one of you, I might put you back because you're quite active. and you can just go and hang out in the pot with all the other guys there. So show you him because he's a bit bigger. Oh. Okay. So you might not be able to tell on this slug, but they have two sets of tentacles. So the first set here, the top, are for looking. So there its eyes that are on stalks here. And then if you look really closely, you can see a second set of tentacles come out, which are kind of more on the face rather than high up on top of the head. And those ones, just like if we look down our face, is its nose. So it uses it for smelling, and it also uses them for feeling. And it's a misconception that some people think slugs have 4 noses. They don't have 4 noses, but in each of those lower tentacles there is a pair of nostrils. So we have 1 nose and we've got 1 pair of nostrils. They've got 2 tentacles with 2 pairs of nostrils. So they have two ways of smelling. He's very much on the go. What else about slugs? Slugs are fantastic. They are one of my favourite animals. So apart from the fact that they can have up to 27,000 teeth, there's so many different species of them. There's around 40 different species in the UK. Now, some people that have gardens and have lots of plants that they love, they don't like slugs because slugs really love to eat nice juicy leaves. But there is a slug which lots of gardeners would like to have, and that is the leopard slug. And it's my favourite slug because it is so beautiful. And that doesn't eat leaves and things. It sometimes might eat a little bit of rotting leaves, but one of its favourite foods is other slugs. So that would be a good slug to have in your garden, a leopard slug. And they're called leopard slugs. They're quite a big slug, one of the biggest ones, and they have like a mottled pattern on that looks like a leopard print. This one is I don't think you can see it that well, but he's got a beautiful colour. He's like green and got yellowy patches on him. Now, an animal which is very closely related to the slug is a snail, and this is a snail which is not come out of hibernation yet. He's kind of got a little seal on his shell, and he can do that because the snails hibernate for the winter and they can keep all their moisture inside so they won't dry out. So he's got a nice little covering on there, which you have to take care not to touch. You don't want to damage him. But this is a snail, and he's a bit confusing because he's also got a slug attached to him. Now, snails also do have a lot of teeth. Again, depend on the species, but they can have around about 14,000 teeth. And slugs and snails eat quite a lot. They can eat around about 40 times their own body weight in a day. And it's also a bit of a misconception that slugs and snails don't move that quickly. If you actually observe them, they are quite speedy. And I once had a pet snail, well, a few pet snails, and they escaped in the night. And when I went to look for them, looked everywhere, couldn't find them. And then I was coming back into the living room and I looked up, and then above the doorway, there was one bigger snail and a little snail carrying on his back. And they must have moved within one night. They must have moved, nearly the length of the hallway, so about 10 meters or so. So it's they're quite speedy, really. A brilliant book that I love, if you want to read more about how fantastic snails are, is this book called A Slow Passion. And this lady, Ruth Brooks, she started doing little experiments by herself in her garden, just to look to see if it was the same slugs coming back, where they're coming from, how far did they have to go away before they came back. She didn't set out to be a scientist, but she turned into a scientist. Sorry, I don't know if I've had problems with the connection there. I would recommend this, and this would be a nice thing to have a read over, and then you could maybe set up your own experiments in your garden or on your balcony. The name of snails comes from, they are a mollusk. So that's lots of animals that are mollusks also include like octopus and squid and all slugs and snails, clams, all sorts of different animals. But slugs and snails, they belong to a group called gastropods. And gastropods basically means stomach foot. And it's because that's basically what they are, a big stomach foot. And they're when we saw the slug, it's kind of one outer body part, and it slithers around on that one foot. And to move around, they make a slime, and they actually have lots of different types of slime. So they might secrete a different slime for moving around than they would perhaps if they were feeling threatened. They might have a different slime. Now, I was so excited when I found this snail. This snail is, if you find this, you've hit the jackpot. So it's quite a small snail. It's called a glass snail, and you might not be able to see on there. If you find a glass snail in your garden, and the shell is quite a flat snail, and the shell is quite translucent, it's a bit see-through, and which is where it gets its name from. But the brilliant thing about it is if you look really carefully, and you have to study it for a while, and just look at the same spot, and you can see this black thing moving like that, and that is its heart beating. And I think that's incredible. Glass snails are my favourite snails because of that. So leopard slugs are definitely my favourite slugs. Glass snails are my favourite snails. I really love slugs and snails. Another animal that I found, keeping a check on the time. Oh, I could talk all day long about mini beasts. They're amazing. Again, I'll show you my not so good drawing. It's a woodlouse, and there are so many different woodlice. And if you looked in your garden, this is an animal which you are quite likely to find. If you've got any any flower pots and things like that, have a look under them. If you've got any logs, look under them, and I could almost guarantee that you would find a woodlouse. They are so beautiful, and they are related to crabs. So the type of animal that they are crustaceans, and they belong to a group of animals called isopods. And there are some woodlice that are really teeny tiny, and sometimes you might look at a whole assortment of woodlice and think, oh, that's a baby woodlouse. Probably isn't. It's probably just a different species of woodlouse. So there's some woodlice that are really tiny, and some, that one was kind of maybe a good centimetre. There's some that can roll up into a ball to protect themselves. And there is an isopod, which woodlice are, that can get about that long. It's called Bathynomus giganteus. And if I was to have a favourite isopod, it's definitely that. I've never seen one. They live in the deepest depths of the ocean, and yeah, they're that big, and I imagine it's like a big woodlouse teddy bear. So they have 7 pairs of jointed legs, so they have 14 legs in total, and that's the same for all of the woodlice. And they're really good for gardens. They help to break down like leaf litter and things. And sorry, I've just seen the cutest snail. Sorry, I moved off snails onto woodlice, but I didn't even realise I had him in my pot. If you can see him on here, he's teeny and he's so cute. And he's a different type of snail to this one. Is the common garden snail. We looked at the glass snail, and he's some sort of I'm not sure exactly what species, but he's a girdled snail, and they've got like a little ridge. Kind of looks like a top part of the shell and an underneath part of the shell. And again, there's maybe around 100 or so different types of snails in the UK. So when you go out in your garden, don't just think, oh, there's a snail. Have a look to see what kind of snail it is. I used to, when I was little, and we had an old airfield behind our house, and I always used to see loads of these beautiful banded snails all over the airfield. And I was just like, oh, they're pretty snails. And it was only a few years ago, and I was on a course, and the lady had one of these snails, and it brought back so many memories for me. It was amazing. And whenever I've gone home now, I've collected empty shells, and these are just they're the same the brown lip snails, and they're the same species, but the patterns on their shell vary a little bit, and these ones are a bit faded now, but again, they're beautiful. I've got a little box of snail shells. Only put them in there when there's empty, when the snails have died from there. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Another interesting thing about the woodlouse that we were looking at before is that it can fart, and a fart can last for an hour. And I think that's a really good fun fact. And I learnt that fact from this lady. And I'd recommend this book for some good fun facts about animals. And there's this one as well. So they're two of my favorite books for getting fun animal facts. I like to share. We're nearly running out of time. So one last animal that I wanted to show you or talk about, and especially because I drew such a beautiful picture of it, is the earthworm. Charles Darwin loved earthworms. I love earthworms. They're a very important animal for helping our plants. They eat rotten material, and then they poop it out. They make soil, and they're fantastic. A really lovely fact about them that they have 5 pairs of hearts. Their hearts are kind of just enlarged blood vessels, and but that's something brilliant about them. And this part I've highlighted on here because if you find an earthworm, again, there's loads of different species of earthworm, and sometimes you might find a really small earthworm and think, oh, it's a baby one, and find a big one and think, oh, it must be the adult. But this is how you can tell if it's an adult or a baby. And if it has this band on it, and that's called the clitellum or the saddle, if it has that, then it's mature, it's an adult. And in here, it has all the reproductive organs. So it has both male and female. If it doesn't have that, then it's not yet mature. So you can sometimes find a really tiny earthworm and it has a saddle, so it is an adult. And other times you can find a really big one, but it's not yet mature. The biggest earthworm has been found in Asia on the mudflats of the Mekong River, and that can be around 3 meters long. The ones we have in the UK here aren't quite as big, but there's still some pretty impressive ones. Maybe I've seen earthworms like that size, and they are fantastic. I'm really running out of time, and I'm so sad because I would love to carry on talking all day. A few last things. If you want to go out, and I really encourage you to go out and have a look in your garden, you can have a look for animals using a bug pot. But if you don't have a bug pot, don't worry. You can use any container that's got something see-through on. So you could use a glass jar, because the glass is really, really, really clear to see through. You could use a pot like this with a clear lid. It's not quite as easy to see through. One I've made here is it wasn't a clear lid, but I've just cut the middle of this part off and put some very clear like cellophane type stuff on, and that's a really good mini beast pot. You can use a magnifying glass to take a closer look. I'm just going to have a quick look to see if you had any questions. I'm not very good at doing two things at the same time. Kevin asked about what my favourite mini beast is. All of them, but really the slugs and snails and the woodlice and the worms and the centipedes. Took forever about centipedes as well. And yeah, so if I'm going to have to go now because it's 20 minutes, but if you want to learn more about it, then we're going to have some on the London Wildlife Trust website. We're going to have some more information, some more links to different resources. There's loads of links already on the Wildlife Trust website. If you can get out, even if it's not into a garden, it might be on your one trip outside a day, if you manage to get to a local park, or even if you just find some rocks, some logs, anything, anywhere, just tip them up, have a look under them. If they're quite big, ask an adult to help you. And yeah, and do share your wildlife, whatever wildlife you can spot. If you are able to take any photos, please share them on our social media, on Wild London and on Wildlife Trust. And we've got a hashtag, which I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it is in the description that I've put down. So thank you. I would love to talk more. And there's even animals that I didn't touch on. We've got centipedes, which I did see some in my garden, but they were too quick. I couldn't catch them. So there's a specimen that I've got there. There's so many different centipedes as well. So that one's quite a short one. That one's a long, thin one. Yes, but I best go now. But thank you very much. And sorry I didn't really get a chance to have a look at your questions. If you've got any at all, then please just contact London Wildlife Trust or the Wildlife Trust, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you very much. And thank you, Lizzie, for letting me share this with you all. Thanks. Bye. Oh, yes.